I'm Paul Mamelo, and today we have with us Stephen Kline, who is the incumbent commissioner in Ward 1 for the Abington Commissioners. And Steve, you're running for re-election in Ward 1. Tell us a little bit about where Ward 1 is and a little bit about Ward 1.
Oh, thanks, Paul. I'd like to thank Abington News and Views for having me here today. Ward 1 is mainly Meadowbrook and parts of Rydal. It is the largest ward by area, and it ends at the Old Welsh Road and Huntington Road, and sandwiched between Meeting House and Huntington Road and Susquehanna. It's all in that area of Meadowbrook and portions of Rydal.
Okay. And you're just completing your first term as commissioner, running for a second term. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the accomplishments that you've had in your first term as commissioner?
Sure. One thing I started doing right after I became elected was to start a better communication method with my constituents. I set up an email newsletter system, which has now grown to over 500 emails, and I use it on a regular basis, where I communicate with my residents by giving them information about things that are going on in the township, meeting schedules, police or crime alerts, all things along those lines, and I think it's been very helpful for my constituents. It has also opened the door for people to feel like they can get in touch with me, and I have had numerous conversations, and I think I pride myself on getting back to my constituents in a very short time frame as to when they give me calls, when they send me emails, or any other fashion they get in touch with me, and trying to get them answers in a very quick time frame. That is, I would say, has been my main accomplishment, and was also my main objective. On top of that, I've also been involved in working with other commissioners on redevelopment projects in the township. We adopted the Old York Road Corridor Improvement Study. When I was commissioner, I started it when I was on the Planning Commission, and I think that'll be a very good framework for moving some revitalization projects forward in the township.
So you keep your constituents informed about what you're doing, and I'm sure they give you feedback on some of the issues facing the township.
They do. I think it's also opened the ability for residents not to feel like they can't tell me anything. By sharing with them as much information as I have, I think they feel like they can share their opinions and information with me, which has been a great back and forth. And it gives me a better understanding of what my constituents are looking for.
Well, tell us a little bit about some of the more difficult issues that you've had to deal with in your first term.
Well, I would say the number one most difficult issue that I probably dealt with was the revitalization of the Baderwood Shopping Center, which is on the fairway right off of Old York Road. It's a old style shopping center. It was purchased by a company called Brandolini, and back when I first started in the Planning Commission, which is six years ago, I guess, was when the first talks of redevelopment of Baderwood came up, and through numerous iterations of that project and the developers' proposals, we ended up having to deal with what ended up becoming a legal challenge against the township zoning ordinance, and worked very closely with a hired land use attorney, consultant for us, and a land planner, and we came up with a solution which we feel, and I think the board made the right decision, we feel will give the township some better control within the new zoning ordinance, which is the FTD ordinance, by controlling the redevelopment of Baderwood, capping residential density, which the old ordinance gave much higher densities, and also incorporated design standards, which we don't have in any other ordinance.
So you actually chair the zoning ordinance rewrite committee, is that right?
I do. I started chairing that right after I became elected, because it was the next piece after the Board of Commissioners adopted the new comprehensive plan, the Abington Township comprehensive plan, which we do every 10, 12 years. And I was a co-chair on that. I worked on the rewriting of the comprehensive plan, and the next step is to do a rewrite of the zoning ordinance, and we've been working on that for a couple of years. It's all volunteers. It's all parts of the township are represented, all the different committees, the Environmental Advisory Council, Planning Commission, Zoning Hearing Board, Economic Development Committee. We're all represented, and we've all been working on this as volunteers. The only person we have as a consultant, paid consultant, would be the people from Montgomery County Planning Commission. And we're going through every piece of the zoning ordinance because the 1996 zoning ordinance is filled with contradictions and loopholes and has caused the township some major issues. And going back to what I was talking about before, Baderwood being number one, the PB zoning district, which is the planned business zoning district, is a horribly written zoning ordinance, and it's a byproduct of what happened in 1996, and we're trying to find ways to eliminate those loopholes and contradictions, and it's taking quite a bit of time, especially on a volunteer basis.
And do you have a time frame for when you see a light at the end of the tunnel?
We do. We actually do see a light at the end of the tunnel. If you asked me 6 months ago, I may not have been able to answer that way. We do see a light at the end of the tunnel. We have really dealt with some of the bigger issues, and we are and bigger problematic areas in the township, and we're starting to go through some of the more finite details of the zoning ordinance, and we're also having people from Montgomery County Planning Commission working on some of those too. We're hoping to start getting major portions of the zoning ordinance to the Board of Commissioners, to the Township Solicitor for a review, for initial review, and then there'll be a whole public process where it'll be brought in front of the Planning Commission, the Board of Commissioners for public hearings, and it will most likely take some time to just go through the public process because there is so much information that's going to be contained in it.
And when do you think that's going to start?
Hopefully by the spring of next year, I would say the public process would start. Some of the initial review processes by people outside of the zoning ordinance committee will start hopefully by the end of this year, beginning next.
Wow, so some of that background must have come in really handy with some of the big issues that have been facing the township. Specifically, I'm thinking about the Roslyn Library issue and the billboards issue that have been very hot for the township. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Well, one thing we did on the zoning ordinance when we started looking at it in the comprehensive plan, and also when we started looking at rewrites, was to find things that had constitutional issues attached to them, and whether they be state constitution or federal constitution. We found that the billboards is one of those issues, and it's one of those things that the township has to deal with, along with many other southeastern municipalities are dealing with right now. And a while back, the board decided to fight the developer who wanted to erect the billboards. I voted for hiring special counsel to help the township fight that, and we're kind of in a lull period right now with that, but the township is committed to going forward and fighting this billboard company and to try to keep them out of our township.
And I guess one of the other big issues that's not involved in zoning, and I'd like to hear your opinion on the non-discrimination ordinance.
Well, I mean, to me it's plain and simple. I mean, everybody should be protected equally. I think it's horrible that we have to have non-discrimination ordinances, because you would just think that everybody inherently would treat everybody equally, but that doesn't, we've learned through numerous historical events that just doesn't happen. And if you look at state law and federal law, our LGBT community, our lesbian and gay, bisexual and transgender community is not protected the same way that somebody who's Jewish, somebody who's black, somebody who's Muslim, they're just not protected the same way, and I think it's about time they are. I think there's places that the different sides of this issue can work together and come to some meeting of the minds, and I'm hoping that's where the board is headed. I've been supporting trying to work together. I will continue to do that, but I do think it's an important issue, and I think it's about time that I think the Abington Township should be one of those trendsetters, along with the other 21 communities that have already passed non-discrimination ordinances in Pennsylvania.
Well, then finally, Steve, why do you feel that residents should re-elect you as commissioner to represent Ward 1 when they vote for your re-election on Tuesday, November 8th, 2011?
Plain and simple. I think their needs and their interests are of the utmost importance in my mind, and I take them to heart. I listen to everybody who I talk to, whether I initially agree with them or disagree with them. I do seek out opposing views just so that I can come to some educated conclusion, not just my own personal views. And I think I've represented my constituents very well. I've listened to them, I've handled their issues, and I will continue to do that if I'm reelected for another term.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. I'd like to thank our guest, Stephen Kline, for being with us today.